Dinner that night was heavy with steam and expectation. Outside, Lisbon was soft with the end of spring, the jacaranda trees dusting sidewalks purple, the Tagus River busy with late ferries, and the distant thrum of traffic rising toward our narrow street in Campo de Aurique. Inside my parents' apartment, the table was set for 7, the ceramic bowls brimming with feijoada and the bread basket warming beside thick slices of queijo. Yet beneath the clatter of cutlery and my mother's gentle prodding to eat more, "You're too thin," something else sharpened the air, a feeling I'd been dreading all week. "I still don't understand," my Uncle Manuel said, shoveling another spoonful of stew. "You have good grades, you could be an engineer, a doctor, just like your cousin Miguel. But no, you want to play video games all day. Ari Daniela, what are you teaching your boy?" He shook his head at my mother, whose lips pressed thin but whose eyes flinched as if she'd already seen the argument unfold. I folded my napkin. My hands were a little slick with sweat. "I'm not playing tea, I'm making games." My cheeks flared, heart thumping hard. "It's different, it's programming, design, storytelling." "Storytelling?" my cousin Clara scoffed. She was back from university for the break and had been taking phone calls from classmates about law internships all afternoon. Who cares about those silly stories? Nobody in this country needs more distractions. Miguel, sitting tall and smug behind his glass of vinho verde, piped up. "I mean, it sounds fun, but who actually makes a living with video games in Portugal?" I glanced at my father, who was carving a chicken wing with slow precision. His silence felt like a verdict. My little sister Mariana, only 16 but clever and observant, gave me a shy sideways glance from the end of the table, something like loyalty flickering through her expression. But she was quiet. They were all quiet as the conversation threatened to slide into another side of ridicule, as if it were a sport passed from one meal to the next. "It's not about fun," I said, voice rising despite myself. "People all over the world do it. It's a real job. There are game studios right here and everywhere else. I already have a demo." Clara snorted. "Oh, a demo, for what, your 3 friends on Discord?" Miguel grinned. "What's next, Tiago, telling people subscribe and like for your Twitch channel?" I put down my fork. I was starting to tremble, the weight of their laughter pinning me where I sat. The aromas, spicy chorizo, earthy beans, turned bitter. My mother reached for my hand but backed away when my father finally spoke. "You want to do this, fine, but don't expect us to help when it falters. Find a real job while you're young enough to change your mind." His Portuguese grew more formal when he was angry, vowels sharp. "Dreams are nice, son, but dreams don't pay rent." The only sound was Mariana's soft exhale, and beyond the window the rumble of a tram passing by. I excused myself with a muttered disculpum, pushed my chair back and left the table. Upstairs, doors closed and conversations resumed without me, while I sat in my old room with a single lamp burning, my own laptop open. The room still smelled of my teenage years, deodorant, code printouts, the faint musk of old paperback comics. I couldn't eat or sleep for hours after, replaying each line, each scoff, running my mouse back and forth over a half-finished level in Unity, but unable to place a single code block. Anger churned inside me, tightening until it hurt. The next morning, I packed my few shirts and left without saying goodbye. Lisbon moved under me for years like a city scene through a glass wall. Job applications, rejections, occasional contract gigs, nothing stable. I walked long distances to save metro fare, my shoes scuffed against stones older than the language I coded in. At night, I freelanced for tiny studios in Porto, Helsinki, Sao Paulo, scraping together enough for rent in a grim apartment in Alcantara, beside the train lines. I Skyped into meetings at 3 in the morning, my face pale and my voice raspy. Sometimes, sleepless, I heard my father's voice in my head. "Dreams don't pay rent." I kept going, wincing with every setback. I tried to visit home once that first year. It was Christmas and the hall was heavy with tinsel and meat pies and laughter, but their joking was gentler now, almost pitying. Clara was clerking at an international firm. Miguel had been accepted to a postdoctorate in biomedical engineering. "How's the game thing, Tiago?" they'd ask, like it was an inside joke no one else got. I barely lasted through gifts before making my excuses and walking home in the rain. Through it all, the project, the one I never described fully to my family, grew inside my battered laptop. Its name was Arvordo, after the woods of Sintra I used to walk with my grandmother as a child. Instead of guns and sorcery, it was a gentle puzzle game about growing trees, patching wounds in a forest, nurturing life where there was none. Quiet, earnest, maybe too subtle for the market's hunger for spectacle. Still, I coded like someone possessed. I borrowed money in bits, traded artwork for code reviews, and slept in the clothes I wore to meetings. 2 years in, I launched it solo onto Steam, expecting little. At first, just a handful of sales, mostly to anonymous users with Scandinavian usernames. Then something strange. A review from a YouTuber who called it the most soulful game of the year. It was translated on a Japanese forum. A small section of Twitch found it, and streamers wept openly as their character mended broken forests. Downloads spiked in Germany, Brazil, Canada, enough to pay the rent, then more. Emails came. Publishers now, indie studios abroad, even a school in Matosinhos wanting to use it for their environmental classes. A technology magazine in Porto wrote a feature titled Solo Dev from Lisbon Plants Seeds of Success. I did not tell my family, not yet, not when the wounds were still tender, anger still thrumming in my veins. Instead, I poured my earnings into the next project, a larger, bolder sequel that could employ friends who'd helped me. I paid debt. I quietly treated Mariana to sushi she'd never tried before, keeping our dinner light and free from awkward questions. When you're ready, she told me, eyes shining, I want to play your game. I thought of the dozens of dinner conversations I'd left stinging, conversations that had hollowed me. I grew my hair longer, indulged in better coffee, started running at dawn along the river. The flares of anger I'd known in those early days cooled, thickened into something like serenity, a river running deep instead of overflowing. 4 years after that first explosive dinner, the Lisbon Indie Games Conference reached out. Would I talk about Arvordo and its sequel? They offered a showcase in the Mercado de Ribeira's glass courtyard, all polished steel and sunlight. This time there was a press list with my name at the top, a national TV segment, my face unshaven and awkwardly smiling on posters in metro stations, invites for friends and family too. I hesitated, phone in my hand one night as tram bells echoed faintly outside. What did I want? To show off, to be right, or simply to return, to step back into the house where I'd been a punchline and ask without anger to be seen for who I was? I sent the invites anyway, quick and brave, before I could reconsider. 3 days later my mother called. Her voice was breathless like she had run a marathon. Tiago, you want us to come to this event with TV. You're up there with other important people. There was something like disbelief shading into pride. My father was quiet in the background. He took the phone and in his clipped way said, "We'll be there." The morning of the conference, Lisbon woke glinting with sunlight, trams rattling over the hills. I arrived early, nerves tight. The Mercado was ablaze with banners and tables, the scent of espresso and pastries cutting through cold glass air. Everywhere people were laughing, trying demos, hugging. At my table, the Arvordo logo shone above a forest green setup, monitors displaying looping scenes of gentle rain and dappled woodland. I recognized faces. Clara in a bright blazer with a tentative smile. Miguel, he'd cut his hair, dressed too nicely for a games conference. Mariana, beaming, bouncing from foot to foot with a kind of shy energy. My mother wore a new light scarf. My father had traded his usual suit for a crisp blue shirt, unsure at first where to rest his hands. Behind them, Uncle Manuel, as skeptical as ever, peered around as if expecting a magician to leap from behind a table. Word spread that I had arrived. A small crowd gathered as the press approached for interviews. I demoed Arvordo on the main screen, trying to appear calm as I described the mechanics, the inspiration, the ache for home, the idea that patience could heal wounds, that gentle acts could matter. Reporters nodded, scribbling notes. I caught glimpses of my family listening, heads a bit higher, eyes wider than I'd ever seen them. Then came the moment I'd both dreaded and hungered for. The host called for the players to try the game, and before anyone else, Mariana stepped up. Her hands were shaking, but in game she moved with care, tending broken trees, gently restoring their branches, building bridges over streams and dark ravines. The hall quieted as she reached the ending, sunlight flooding the digital forest, a small character looking up at a world made new. She put her hand to her mouth, and for a second I thought she might cry. But then she spun, facing the others, our family, the press, the strangers watching, and said, "He made this. Tiago made this, it's beautiful." Behind her, Uncle Manuel looked perplexed but finally, softly nodded. Clara and Miguel, still caught in uncertainty, clapped politely but glanced sideways at one another, processing what this meant. My father took a trembling step forward. He didn't say much. He simply looked at me, his eyes glistening, and pressed his hand to my shoulder. "We were wrong," he said quietly so only I heard beneath the noise. Even with the applause, with the cameras, with people lining up for autographs or a minute of my time, that was the moment, the single searing second, when the old seam of pain broke and something new mended in its place, as softly and natural as leaf on branch. Later, as the showcase wound down, I found Clara by the window. She watched the meter-thick crowds not quite meeting my gaze. "Tiago, I'm sorry for being such an idiot." I shrugged. The anger from years ago was gone. We were kids. "You had your plans, I had mine." She smiled awkwardly. "It's good what you did, good for everyone, even us." At the food stalls, Miguel held my game's press pamphlet, asking about its environmental studies integration. Uncle Manuel tried Arvaudo for himself, squinting at the monitor, then nodding with gruff approval. My father and mother held hands at the edge of the crowd, eyes never far from mine. When it was over, the family gathered by the pier as dusk pinked the sky. The river sparkled, boats bobbing. My mother pressed a warm pastel de nata into my hand, an old comfort. "Come home for dinner this Sunday?" she asked. There was no edge, no hesitation this time. I took a breath, watching gulls wheel over the rooftops, and nodded. Serenity filled me, not the triumph I'd imagined, not the rush of victory over doubters, but something truer. The anger that had once driven me was gone, cool and part of the long ground I'd crossed. Now there was only gratitude, and at last the quiet strength to return as myself, welcomed and whole.